Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Robert Baylor, Director of Communications at NUCA. Welcome to our latest Webinar Wednesday, sponsored by NUCA National Partner Tenna. First, before we begin, some webinar housekeeping for attendees. Today's webinar will be recorded. It will be available on NUCA's YouTube channel and via our webinar webpage, both of which can be accessed via nuca.com. All participants are muted upon entry. Phone participants can use *6 to mute and unmute themselves. Questions will be asked at the end of the presentation. To ask a question, you can submit a written question at any time using the chat feature, and I'll read them at the conclusion of our discussion. Now let's get started. This month's NUCA webinar is presented by our national partner, Tenna. Innovations in technology have notoriously been failing to meet the needs of the construction industry. When the desire to move from tedious manual procedures became evident, many contractors looked to solve this problem by purchasing platforms that work independently to solve specific pain points, which eventually led to an overwhelming tech stack with solutions that did not work well together. Join us today to learn why failing to improve your company's tech stack can be detrimental to your daily operations and ultimately to your bottom line. We'll also present actionable steps you can take on how to avoid the costly pitfalls that can occur when implementing new technologies. Today's webinar is presented by Russ Young. As Chief Business Development Officer for Tenna, Russ oversees the growth strategy for the organization by working with sales, partners, and customers to ensure success. Russ brings 2.5 decades of experience from Google, Amazon, Oracle, and FMI in using best practices for technology strategy, selection, and adoption. He applies his knowledge from these organizations to build awareness and provide thought leadership to the construction industry. Thank you all for joining us today on this NUCA Webinar Wednesday. Russ, I turn the webinar over to you.
Thanks, Bob. Sorry, folks. Bob's got a great WebEx voice. Now you're stuck with my somewhat nasally presentation, but I think we've got some really good data to share with you today. So I'll kick right into it. Today we're the subject is CFO in the know, and what we're finding in construction, particularly with utility contractors who have so much equipment, is demystifying that data coming out from their equipment is really becoming $1 million problem. But what we're going to do is kick up and talk about the entire tech stack and how the leading CFOs at some of the leading construction companies are solving that and share some of that data around that. So first off, I'm Russ. Bob already gave you a great introduction, so no need to harp on that. I'm going to talk about construction tech today, where it's been in the past, where it's going in the future, and the challenges we've seen with it, some of the solves that some of the leading companies are doing that the data is indicating to us. Going to talk a little bit about the benefits of having all this data flow into ERP or sort of a central repository. And then we're going to dive a little bit into the specifics around equipment management, because for utility contractors, it's been a huge problem. And I hear a lot of CFOs say some version of, pardon my French, but my equipment is a shit sandwich. I don't really know what it costs me and what's going on there. So that's really what we're going to do today. We're going to move very, very fast, wrap this up in 25 or 30 minutes, and then leave maybe 5 for questions. And as a housekeeping, I think Bob is monitoring the questions as well. Bob, feel free if there's a hot question on one of the topics, feel free to interrupt me or we can hop on at the end. Wanted to quickly sort of set the stage here. This is some data coming out of FMI. This is from 1,200 construction companies in the United States. And it was basically them self-reporting on where are they spending time in a regular week now. And the results are pretty interesting in that you'll see this black bar at the top is really just talking about the stuff they want to work on, project execution and coordination. And then as you go down into the orange area, and then the blue area here at the bottom is what I find so fascinating, that about 35% of the time, they are self-reporting as on very non-productive activities. So looking for project data information, conflict resolution. These are huge hours. Now, the good news is the ones that are implementing tech to solve repeat process and save labor hours are seeing big differences here. So I like to sort of flip this on its head and go, this 35% number in kind of a labor shortage industry is a massive opportunity for us. It means our businesses tend to be lower margin, higher risk than some other industries. And so even getting this from 35% down to a 25% number is fantastic. We don't, manufacturing sees these same reports to be in the single digits, right? 5, 6, 7%. It's unfair with construction, right? We go to different project sites, right? And we don't go to the same building and do the same process every day. So, but the good news is 35% is a very solvable number today, just following some of these best practices on what we're seeing some construction companies do. And a lot of this is around tech today and the sort of resurgence of construction technology. As we move forward, I want to present the other side of that coin, though. So, what I hear from folks is, hey, we did buy some tech and we invested in it, but it didn't work the way we expected. So this is the same 1,200 companies in this same report. And we asked, hey, when you invest in tech and it didn't work, why not? And so these numbers here are them saying, when it didn't go the way we expected, why not? So you'll see things like here, poor fit with work process and procedures, low adoption. You can kind of read through these yourself. They're all around kind of that time frame of change management of we bought it to did we ever get to full utilization of this platform and get everybody doing what they were supposed to do. Skipping to the punch on this, if you take anything away from our brief time here together, is a few lessons learned from this study when we did the regression analysis against it. The ones that are doing well and reporting they're happy with their tech, there are some glaring similarities. One is focus. So construction focus. You put it another way, you want to pound a hammer. Pound a nail, get a hammer. You want to put in a screw, get a screwdriver, kind of a talk that a lot of us were sort of forced to buy tech that wasn't purpose built for the job, meaning there was a lot of tech out there that maybe wasn't purpose built for construction. And we see much lower satisfaction rates when it isn't purpose built for the job. So tech that really understands and focuses on construction, we tend to see much higher and better results. The second piece we saw was really around integrations, which is going to be really a key thing we're going to focus on today. And that construction really suffers when these different sets of data sits in different area. If the bidding and estimating data stays in bidding and estimating, doesn't get to the project, or the equipment management data stays on paper or in various systems and never gets into the ERP. Same for project data and project documents, right? And so that integration play, although kind of a bit of a buzzword, but literally means, does everybody have access to the same live set of data? And so that second one was a big one. The third one was really around what I would call customer success, right? And so we saw big differences on what I would say, do you have executive alignment? Do you have a customer support representative or an account manager, right? So this is literally things like if you have an 800 number that you call, that ends up being bad. But if you have a customer, a person at your tech company that their name and phone number, and they know who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, and they've taken the time to know your company, right? Some people refer to this as partnership as opposed to working with a tech vendor. Also, do you have executive alignment? Do the people high up in your company know the people high up in the company that you're trying to work with? Was a big differentiator in success. Now, what's probably surprising is that this shouldn't be surprising, right? When construction companies work with other construction companies, right, we don't work with them because they're perfect. We work with them because we know the people and we built trusted relationships. And if things are going sideways, we know who to call and who to trust to get things fixed. What we determined from this analysis is that the same thing is true with the technology you pick, right? You need to what we call zipper up that relationship. And know the execs and know the people that actually get things done for you. And that is a huge differentiator. So if there's anything you do take away, please take away those few things. I don't want to offer those up as a cheat code, right? You still need to do the homework to figure out who you want to work with and why and who's the right fit for your company. But those are kind of a buyer beware data that we're finding out. So now we'll dive a little deeper into this concept of tech and how construction has embraced tech over time, right? And if you go back maybe a dozen years ago, we sort of saw as some of the new construction tech was coming on, we saw this sort of one-stop shop concept come up. I hate to name names, but they do paint the picture like HCSS or CMIC kind of had this dream of buy one tech and it'll kind of do everything. Long story short, the data's in, it didn't work. None of us is getting by with one piece of technology. and that just kind of equates to construction just being too different across the United States, right? Not only just in what we do, are we a mechanical contractor? Are we a heavy civil? Are we a utility contractor? But even what kind of work we do there, are we working in cities? Are we working in the country? What is our labor situation? Are we heavily unionized, or are we right to work? Anyway, the long story short is there's too many variables. And so then what we saw was sort of an interesting pendulum swing where it went too far to one side to try and like cram everything into one system where it didn't work. And then we just kept adding things in, right? So in equipment management, for example, we would have different things from the OEM providers and different stuff from tool people and different stuff for the road, and came up with different tech for the different use cases around safety or your location utilization, preventative maintenance and maintenance. And then, of course, bidding and estimating, we'd see like islands created within Excel spreadsheets, right? And then, equipment management, we like to think and hope people would look at something like Tenna, or bidding and estimating. People start looking at things like B2W, right? You have legal compliance reporting stuff. CRM is becoming a big one. Document management is one where routinely when I was at FMI, much like equipment management, where we would find people would have 4 or 5 or 6 solutions just for that one area, we'd uncover the same thing in document management, right? So like maybe I called this the plan grid problem, right? It was a wonderful tool and the field bought a lot of it, but to the CFO and the no part of our presentation here, right? The CFO might not even find out about PlanGrid till they looked at the invoice and said, why do we have 40 licenses of PlanGrid? What is it, right? And so you see that, they're using all these different systems that aren't necessarily connected to each other. And then project management, right? You see all these different solutions for that, and then labor. And as you see, this is a fairly simple representation, believe it or not. But as we would go and meet with a lot of construction companies, you'd realize that many of them, any of them are more than, doing more than 10 million or so a year in annual revenue, end up having 20, 30, 40, 50. I've been at companies that had 80 different technology solutions within their company that they're trying to figure out how to use. And so you can imagine if each one of these is a different technology solution, then they're also trying to integrate them. And in the past, as this pendulum swung to sort of underbuying tech to overbuying tech, we saw kind of a spider web created here where all these things have point-to-point integrations to share that data around. And it ends up that's very hard and difficult to maintain. It ends up looking like more not a nice clean spider web, more one of those post-Halloween spider webs where many of the strands are broken and the data's not getting anywhere and it's too complex and people don't even know where different things are on the spider web. The good news is that we're really seeing this simplify as time goes by into a very simple hub and spoke. One equipment management solution, one document management solution, one project management solution, one ERP, right? And what's an interesting concept here is as we've seen these pendulum swings. So with tech, we saw it swing from not enough tech to too much tech, and now it's balancing to that simple hub and spoke, right? We also see it that replicating across time in terms of how the people behave and how our buying behavior changes. So what we saw in the past was maybe too many time-consuming meetings on a team here, right? As time went by, and that was as we had that single one platform that didn't work. And then kind of it swung too far the other way that we were working in silos, right? That the field team did what the field team wanted, and the shop team did their stuff, and the folks in the office and project management did their thing, and finance did their thing, and they just tell each other what tech they were buying, kind of a way. And then as time went by, we found a balance there where we find that right amount of how people are working together, and that's the good news. And as the tech is balanced, this process is balanced. And then kind of the third trend we see there is how people evaluate tech, right? So in the old days, this field team not being consulted, or you might have heard the term field-friendly technology, right? Or mobile-friendly tech that's really coming out and very popular now and is sort of winning the day. That also equates to how people invested in this tech. So in the old days, we'd almost hear of like CEOs and owners and CFOs that would sit in on a product demo for tech and then just buy it and say, hey, this looks great. I like this. I know my company. And then the field team would just find about it almost after the fact. And Friday they did things one way, and then Monday they'd show up to work and they'd be told how they were doing things now. Long story short, that didn't work. The data is in on that, and that we see a much more wasted energy, time, and money on this tech that gets bought and then doesn't get implemented well. Interestingly enough, we've actually seen the pendulum over time swing too far the other way, right? And this was really interesting news as we went through this data, that some companies, the CEO, CFO, executive suite, all the way to maybe project management as well, has even just offloaded this buying responsibility, right? So like for equipment management, like Tenna does, we will see people go, I'm just going to let the equipment management team select that, and then they're going to tell me what they got. Now, guess what? Now suddenly the CFO is out of the loop because they don't get to see what data they need integrated into the ERP. Maybe the project management team is unhappy because the stuff doesn't flow into their operational platform like a Procore or something like that. And what we've realized is that if you want to be successful here, there's actually a balance of departmental alignment. So there's just like one piece of technology doesn't run your company, 80 pieces of technology doesn't run your company. But we're finding this balance of like it's 10, 6 to maybe 12 really trusted tech that are integrated well together. And that same balance is with your people and your process. So if you find that balance of tech, people, and process, that is where we're seeing by far the best results here. So sort of skipping ahead to what that looks like when it's done well, you move from this really messy spider web and overbuying tech and trying to overtrain people and having data sit in places where it's unusable, and you end up with this what ends up being a very simple hub and spoke system where you've got your project management single system, like this might be a Procore or something similar like that, but you don't have three systems, right? You have one project management system that you've run a mature process in selecting and implementing. You've got one document management play, maybe that's Ignite or the like, but it's one simple repository that's well integrated. You might have other data as well that you're managing. You might have equipment management. If you're a utility contractor, chances are you have complex equipment needs, right? So instead of having multiple equipment management solutions, you have one equipment management solution. Selfishly, I hope that's Tenna, right? But the data is pretty clear that getting all of that on one platform instead of trying to get everybody to learn 4 or 5 different platforms and make those work doesn't work. And of course, things like bidding and estimating. So I came up with some of the top 6 that we saw. So HRIS, the good news on all of these is they make all of your team perform better when they are selected correctly. So when that data we just presented to you, when construction companies do that well, not only do we see a much higher success rate in implementing this tech, at the end of it, we see a massive up-leveling in what these employees actually can do for the company. Put another way, if we have CFOs on the call, a good ERP, an accounting platform, if you're on QuickBooks, your job is harder. But if you're on one of the more construction-focused platforms like a Vista or a Sage or a Coins or a Foundation, you now are able to up-level what you're able to do for the company, right? So you might even see the data we see in terms of productivity. What might take somebody 5 years to be good at their job, they can get very proficient at it in 2 years with the right technology. Project management, same thing. You might hear Procore, see the same data, right? That a 2-year project manager can be as efficient and as good at their job as a 5-year project manager, right? So this time to launch is interesting. We see the same thing across these different plays. Equipment management, same thing. Instead of using a mix of just Vision Link and John Deere and Verizon and the like, and trying to snap all those together for all these different use cases on one platform that up levels the ability of the equipment manager, and that 2-year guy can be more like a 5-year guy, and on and on. So hopefully that all resonates and makes sense. Simple hub and spoke system, and those of you that are in finance, I will tell you that besides having vastly more success, besides lowering your training budget, getting people to productivity much more quickly, and even besides these islands of data, What we are also discovering is that just a simple spend analysis, right? If you are investing in 50 different technologies instead of say 15, just the cash outlay on this tech is pretty massive. So the dollars and cents add up pretty quickly. So moving ahead, there's kind of the basic plays of where the data is telling us the best construction companies are going, and just a few takeaways from that we are seeing these connected systems now. So what are a few of the things we're seeing, and what do those mean? Like that folks are actually now finding more money. What's an example is in equipment management specifically, if you actually know where your equipment is and if it's operating, something that's simpler, you end up, not renting the same piece of equipment. Oh, it's underutilized on over here on this part of the job site. And this is something that replicates hundreds of times, right? So when these are connected, what's going on. That's what happens. This single point of entry means trusted data, right? So instead of imagining, somebody writing their equipment hours on a piece of paper and, that gets driven in the superintendent's F-150, and then someone like types that into a Sage or something like that, this single point of entry on a mobile platform is a massive differentiator. So if you can automatically gather data, great. Digital capture is great. And sort of these paper-driven processes we're realizing take too much time to arrive with there. And then sort of this one platform, right? So you see everybody's trying to get onto these single platform. Now, sadly, the bad news is there is no one platform. No one's getting by with just one piece of tech, but these one platforms for the different areas, for projects, for accounting, for equipment, and then have those tied together. But these one platform is sort of saving the day. And then these duplicative process. So these repeatable billing processes, like on the equipment side, making sure your equipment actually does get billed. And these simple things where, many thousands and tens of thousands of dollars are just left on the table because we don't have these repeatable processes that are proven to get stuff out the door quickly. Or, that end of month madness is one example of, gosh, we got to figure out, who's getting billed for what. So just some quick takeaways there. And then I added a little bit here. Most of that is sort of across all technology, specific to Nuka. And, let me pause and say we are massive fans of Nuka. We worked in Nuka for several years now. I work with the national folks a lot, as do a bunch of our team. And then at the local level, we work with a bunch of the local Nuka folks. Some of our folks are even, on boards and committees and help volunteer and run stuff as well. So we're big fans. And one question I get around Nuka is because if you're a utility contractor, goodness, you've got a bunch of equipment and it is difficult to manage. One of the reasons, we love being here because it's such a huge problem to solve. So I did want to dive in quickly with the time we have left and talk about sort of the trends we see in equipment specific to construction, right? And so they kind of break into 4 levels. We see this manual process for equipment. I don't know how well you can see this on the webinar, but this is an image of a whiteboard. This is literally a company that has, Post-it note images of their equipment, and they are manually moving it around from project to project to say where it is right now. Long story short, if something gets stolen or it gets moved from one project to another, this doesn't magically move, right? And tons of money is lost in preventative maintenance and maintenance issues. Under billing for equipment is a huge issue here. Something we call equipment hoarding, wasted gas, tons of things that adds up to a ton of money at this level. This is probably a little bit like when you would hop in your car and use a map, right? Not a lot of people do that now. Then we kind of have this level 2 where most of the industry is, and this is really where we see people trying to get by with a bunch of systems. Specific to equipment management, we see 3 big areas of complexity. One is the type of equipment, right? So if you own your CAT or your John Deere or your Volvo, you have different systems for that. If you're renting from United Rentals or Sunbelt, you have different systems for that. For your stuff on the road, you might have different systems. And there's even different tool tracking systems, like Hilti or Milwaukee, et cetera. They're all great systems, but kind of give you a whole bunch of systems with data that doesn't marry up with each other. The second one is really the people. The folks in the office will be on their laptop, and the folks out in the field will want a great mobile platform. as one example. And then, of course, there's the use case, which is so, location, utilization, safety, things like, video cameras and things like that, compliance issues, the preventative maintenance and maintenance. Up until recently, you had different tech to do all these different things. And now all of that can now be on one platform. To give a really simple analogy here, this is a little bit like, you used to hop into a Ford or a BMW or rent a Hertz, and those all had different systems, right? And you had to learn them. Whereas now, you kind of, what is, level 3 that we call it in equipment management is a little bit like your iPhone, right? It doesn't matter whose car it is or what make it is, or whether it's an Uber or you're renting from Hertz, you have your iPhone, right? And just your simple iPhone solution that you plug in and it does everything. And that's where equipment management has become today. So that one equipment management solution that covers all of that, all the people, all the different use cases, and all the equipment on one single pane of glass. And that's where everybody's getting to now. And then what I would add to that is that one single system then integrates into your other places where it needs to be, right? Your CFO probably doesn't want to go into your equipment management solution, right? They would like that data to flow into the ERP and be there. Your project manager probably wants that stuff to be in Procore, or whatever your operation system, or if you're using Riskcast or something like that, you want that data going there, right? So this one platform play, fully integrated. This is what I mean when I tell you about that simple hub and spoke. And then kind of level 4 is more future looking, right? Not most folks are just playing with this, but this is autonomous vehicles, which we all know where more of them are coming, not less, or electrification, robotics, and on the software side, kind of a move into business intelligence, and dashboarding and AI, artificial intelligence as well. Most of these are being played with, but more of them are coming, not less. Kind of the point I wanted to make is that you have to get to level 3 in order to make use of level 4, right? You don't kind of get to skip ahead of this. You can skip level 2. You can go from 1 to 3, but you can't get to 4 without actually knowing where and what all your stuff's doing. So this is where we see the industry today. Just to kind of give you a thought, this manual, we still see about 20%, and this is the United States, that are at this what we call greenfield, really still just using a manual process, not automating it. Level 2 is where the vast majority of the industry is, where they have a system of systems that don't talk well to each other, right? So they don't have the simple iPhone plugged into their car, right? They're still using, Ford or BMW's in-dash technology, if you will, and they don't really speak very well to each other. This level 3 is where everybody's kind of in a race to get to these single platforms really well integrated. And then level 4, this is a self-reported number at 2%. I think this is the number of people that are playing with it. Nobody is using autonomous vehicles as their entire fleet, is my point. But a lot of folks are playing with that. So I see we're just about to hit 2:30, Bob. So I'll wrap up here, and if we have any questions, I'll take those. But in closing, I just want to say the numbers add up quickly here, right? So the wasted time, energy, and effort in, with construction companies sort of misbuying and misimplementing tech is massive. Specific to equipment, just to give you an idea. So here, this is data. We're on stage with our friends at Trimble. At Trimble Dimensions, we had gathered a bunch of data. So these EM locations, EM location transfers are specific to Tenna's integration into Vista, and some dollar savings there. But my point is that the dollars add up quickly. So instead of going into specifics, I would just quickly say that, $100 million annual revenue, heavy civil or utility contractor in the U.S. will typically have about $20 to $25 million invested in equipment. That's just the capital expense. And what we're learning is that you manage it well, you can save a good 15 to 18%. And my point is this: it's a $5 million number in CapEx alone. So what would you do if you do this correctly? You got to think, what am I going to do with this extra $5 million in CapEx? And then operational expense is around 20%. So if you look at, and this is probably misreported, but my point is this: a 20% on a $100 million company, if you get this 10% better, which is very doable, take that from a 20% to 18%, you're talking about $2 million in operational expense, right? So my point is this: the numbers are massive. Getting this right is a huge differentiator, and we're seeing winners and losers. So my point is this: it's something to think about now. The numbers are worth it. And really, we're about 2:31. Hopefully that wasn't too fast, and hopefully it wasn't too slow. But that's all I've got for you today. Bob, before we sign off, I did want to check in and see if there were any questions.
Russ, you did it just right. Let's now open the webinar to questions. You can use the chat feature to submit a question, and I'll read the question to the presenter. Or if you prefer, unmute yourself, state your name and company, and ask the question directly. Remember to remute yourself after you finish. And Russ, we've got one question. We have a big labor shortage. Is there any data on how the best construction companies are helping to solve this with technology?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. We get that all the time. Right? Every conference I go to, labor shortage is a big one. Solving the labor shortage, getting more people to go into construction is all of our problems. Great organizations like NUCA, construction technology partners like Tenna, and all of the construction firms working together just to get more people at the table to give construction an honest look. But more importantly, with tech, and I suppose tech plays a play there. That is, we show that it's much cooler than it used to be. The techs like technology like Tenna or some of the incredibly cool new equipment coming out is great ways to sell it for all of us. The other point I'd say is we see some very interesting data and that there's sort of a mismatch inside construction. What I mean by that is that when we talk to executives and we ask them, they are worried that tech is going to annoy their field folks, right? They're like, oh, I can't invest in this tech. They're already overworked. And if I get tech, I'm going to have, old people that look like me, Bob, they're going to quit, right? But when you talk to the field and the shop folks, they actually want more tech. The data is very firm on this, and it's very interesting that the expectations are just so different. The execs think that field doesn't want tech, and the field is like, we need more tech, which leads to the thought of, do these guys talk to each other? So what I would say is we're finding that, construction is heavily localized, right? You have people that do business in these 1, 2, or 3 states, kind of, lots of privately owned, family-run businesses, right? And they're having to compete. And one of the ways they've been forced to compete without other differentiators is just with pay. Like, hey, come here and we'll pay you 5 or 10% more. And that's a kind of an unsustainable arms race. And what we realized is that tech is becoming a huge differentiator. Put another way, 10 years ago, people went into tech and wanted to, operate an excavator because it meant they didn't have to sit at a laptop. But what has clearly changed is all of them have one of these smartphones in their pocket. And yeah, I'm 56 now, and I still think of this as a little magic box. But everybody in their 20s or 30s that we're trying to recruit into construction, this is how they live their life. And I'll tell you, it doesn't even matter if you like that, love it or hate it. Having tech that embraces this and makes their life easier is becoming mission critical. So if you are still dependent on, hey, come work at our company and you got to learn these 18 different pieces of technology in our very specialized workflow and process, you are losing that arms race. They're going to go work at other places where the job is easier and safer and where the onboarding is simpler, right? And they can use the stuff they're used to. They can, they're now used to paying with Venmo. And, I don't know, thanks to COVID, we all learned how to use a QR code at a restaurant, right? I guess my point is this, this is now, tech is a big differentiator in your recruiting process. In fact, you look at the data, pay is one of them, but this ability to use tech is another big one. So I would say yes. In addition to that, I'd add that, we see this massive labor shortage and just getting more done with less is important. So if you can get more done with the people you have, which clearly tech is enabling, that data is in, that's also a huge differentiator. So yes, is it the magic bullet to solve everything? No. But is it definitely part of that recipe? 100% yes.
Those are excellent points. Are there any other questions for us? Leave it in the chat feature. You can always unmute yourself as well. Got another one, Russ? Our insurance is just getting huge. How are leading companies using tech to increase safety and keep insurance costs in check?
Oh, yeah. I was just at IRMI last month, Insurance Risk Management meeting down in Orlando. Hot topic. We partner with a lot of the leading carriers, Zurich, Travelers, AXA XL, a lot of the big brokers that are really great at construction. There's a lot of great data here. Boy, Bob, this should be a whole nother half hour session for sure. The short version is yes, tech. In fact, I would say this: a lot of insurance carriers are forcing people to purchase tech like this. There's a lot of stories here, but Tenna specifically to avoid accidents on the road and accidents in the field. And this one platform play is really going well there. And that, like, cameras have been around for a while, and cameras first came out. There was a lot of resistance to them, kind of a Big Brother feel, a little bit like I don't, if I told my kid I was putting a tracker on him, he wouldn't like that. But if I give him an iPhone that he wants to use and it happens to tell me where he is, we just see better results. And we're seeing the same thing here, that because Tenna is, as one example, is so field friendly and people love using Tenna, that not only did everybody get the results, but like things like the safety features, like cameras and AI driven cameras, like distracted driving, speeding, hard braking, this accident avoidance and avoiding catastrophic incidents. And when you're not at fault, quickly proving it. That's a huge one. But with a system that everybody loves to use, we're seeing massive differentiators. I guess it shouldn't be too shocking that the tech for safety has actually been around for a while, but putting it all into one system that people love to use, that's what's new here. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised that using something you love instead of something that feels Big Brother is getting better results. But yeah, we are seeing, definite early indicators on avoiding catastrophic incidents is huge. And the data is firm enough that a lot of the insurance carriers are starting to tell you have to invest in technology like this in order to renew your insurance.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. Russ, thank you very much for your time today to present this information to our guests. We'd also like to thank Tenna for the continued and very kind support of NUCA and our educational webinar series. Today's webinar has been recorded. A recording of this webinar will be made available on the nuca.com website and on our YouTube channel over the next few days. And thank you for your time today to join us for this special industry webinar and for supporting NUCA. Thank you for your time this afternoon, and please enjoy the rest of your week.